Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Vijay. I've been with Totango for a couple of years now, 10 years of product management experience, and been doing software development all my life. Excited to be here.
And so Kevin O'Kame. So I lead the customer success function at Totango, and get a fantastic opportunity to work with so many leading companies in the world, which is a wonderful privilege. So Vijay, I think you skipped over your fun fact conveniently, which if you want to cover now, go for it.
I used to sell I started my career selling forklifts. I'm glad I'm not doing that.
All right, I'll cover mine. Way back when, I would have probably not predicted that I would be leading customer success teams, or would have found that as my job eventually. But my original career direction in college was I thought I'd have my own nature show, is more or less what I thought. So that predates Animal Planet, Discovery Channel, all the shows. It was a realization my senior year in college that I didn't know if I wanted to live in the woods for 10 years before having enough research content to go out and do that. So I had a little bit of a career direction. So today we're going to get into a topic on bridging the gap between customer success and product. So when we say product, largely think product management, but some of the extensions that go back into engineering teams, certainly even product marketing. So depending on the structure in a company, some of those divisions might be separate and apart from a product or product management function. And so we're going to get into this value chain that can exist between the product organizations and customer success functions that ultimately allow you to move from having just a product capability and maybe a basic set of go-to-market checklist items that would say things like support's ready to support a product or service. We have collateral to sell and market this, and we're kind of ready to go, bring this to market. From really having a very clear delivery chain in place, where there's an expected outcome that product or service would be intended to produce, and making sure that there's alignment from end to end, including the packaging of that product or service, that would allow you to execute a proactive journey with customers to produce that outcome in a very reliable and systematic way. That partnership and collaboration is more important than ever. There's capabilities that didn't exist in the past that exist now to really guide customers in a proactive way and deal with problems and make sure that expansion and renewal are handled appropriately, and make sure that there's engagement during their entire journey with your company that's characterized by high frequency but also by high quality interactions. So we'll get into to that. And so I'll start just with customer success. And when you think of customer expectations, they are often highest after the sale. And the reason for that is that's when a customer is going to get all the value that they expected and were promised, and during a selling cycle, they were built up to believe in, right? And that's why they ultimately made that purchase decision with your company. And so after the sale, if you're a customer, you're expecting, I'm going to get all that value, and so your expectations are quite high. And if you just took a general customer journey, which may be slightly different depending on the business, stuff in gray is really, if you're a customer, you're becoming aware that a company or a need might exist. You maybe start doing some research to find out, well, what capabilities are out there in the marketplace. You're going to start to make a decision, and so you probably have gone through and looked at a bunch of proof points and evaluation criteria, and ultimately you're going to decide, and then you're going to purchase it, and there's a buying experience that takes place. Everything that happens after that, if you think of an installation onboarding process, think of driving adoption in your organization as a customer. Think of getting help, which isn't necessarily just technical support or support in a traditional sense. It could be finding information out and looking at troubleshooting guide content or even adoption content. So help can be a variety of things. then ultimately, hopefully growing and expanding your relationship around that product or service, doing a renewal, and sometimes even discontinuing that relationship. And so there might be an opportunity for a win back or something like that. That might be something that you want to consider and design in a process. So customer success or client success, depending on your program name, largely focuses on that part in green. That's after the sell. And while you have on the left-hand side, you've got a situation where basically you're kind of creating an outcome. If you're a product team, you've got a sales team that's selling and positioning the outcome, and marketing certainly participates there. These customer or client success functions are delivering outcomes to customers. So it's kind of the follow-through motion to make sure that all of that value and all those outcomes are achieved by customers. And so what you have is you have these CS teams that have this really great vantage point across that post-sale experience with that product or service. And so that's extremely valuable insight that can be fed back into product teams. And we'll get into a little bit on how. But the other thing is those individuals, whether they're inside or field-based and spend most of their time on customer sites and locations, have this ability to see what customer needs are, whether they're today related to your product or service or might be an unmet market need that they just get to hear often enough. And not only can they see that need in a customer, but they can also see if there's a gap in your company's ability to deliver on that need. Because they're in that position where they're executing a variety of programs and services in that post-sale arena. So if you're the person that's sitting there and you see what a customer wants and maybe you can see a limitation that exists in your ability to deliver on that, that's again very valuable insight if you can feed that to the right part of your company. And so we'll end up talking a little bit about that in just a bit. So we'll talk a little bit about product management. So product management, typically, you're kind of all the way off to the left of that slide. So if you've heard the phrase shift left, you're shifting really pretty far left. And it should be around packaging an outcome. And so if you're a product manager, you're focused on all of the planning, forecasting, trying to come up with a product or a service that's going to fit a market need, that's going to allow you to capture market share. If maybe it's a new feature or an enhancement to a product that's going to be part of your roadmap. And so you want to make sure that what you're going to invest in and what you're going to create and build in your company is going to deliver value for customers. The problems that you're going to be solving are important problems that are going to have a large enough market that is worth competing in. And you also want to make sure that there's some sort of differentiation that you can bring to the market so that it's not a commodity type thing where you're not, just not differentiated and you're entering something that might be highly competitive. So that requires just this extraordinary level of insight into customer needs and a deep level of customer understanding or empathy. And if you're that product management individual, that's got to come from going out and meeting with customers. And so that's, again, one of the areas that we'll dive a little bit into is how customer success can help to solve some of that problem. So there's going to be some mutual value areas here. So what we'll do is we'll actually step through, first, how can CS help product teams? And so I'll hand it over in just a moment to Vijay to talk through that. And what we'll come back to is how can product help customer success or client success teams as well? Because I think there are some areas that will provide significant value in terms of the programs and having consistency and process that you can execute throughout a customer lifecycle. So Vijay, with that, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Kevin. Oops. All right. So what I'd like to do is dig a little deeper into a product lifecycle and talk about how CS and product can partner at every stage of the lifecycle. And a typical product cycle begins with a planning phase, a discovery phase, a build, and a launch, for anything that product teams do. So we'll just go into each of these phases and just understand a little more. So product teams in a discover and planning phase are really the key goal for product teams is to expand new markets or find new markets for a new source of revenue. With that being the primary goal, it's a key part of the product activity to be able to decide what to plan and what to prioritize in terms of a given period, which is a quarter or a year. For example, in the executive summit in April, Guy set out the theme for Totango, which was zero time to impact, one-click engagement, and extensibility. And all the features that Ravit showcased in the earlier session and all the features that Totango have been building on have been geared around these themes. And ultimately, the outcome that Kevin was talking about, that product is doing, these themes eventually are trying to deliver certain outcomes. It could be improved customer experience, reduced churn, but the idea is that's you identify on what themes you want to work on, and then that's what the product team begins working on. Now, to be able to decide on themes, the sources of input is definitely market. Market plays a big role in what product teams are trying to do. We want to be market leading as well as being aware of what competition exists and what innovation exists. So we're working towards that, as well as all the customer requests that are coming in from customer success teams. Product teams are looking at that and seeing which of these requests map to those themes that product teams can execute on at any given point. To be able to have this process effective, it's really important to have a consistent process for these enhancements to flow in on a consistent basis and to have product teams triage them on a regular basis. Just a quick show of hands, how many of you have some sort of product engagement or a prioritization or a planning phase that you guys work with in your company? All right, cool, pretty good. Anyone wants to just briefly mention how you interface with? Do you mind just briefly saying?
So in our company, we have a product council that meets bi-weekly.
Okay.
And there's a little less than half a dozen voting members of the council.
Got it.
And, I'm sorry. And customer success has one of the stronger votes.
Okay.
What actually comes out of the product
Great.
process, though, isn't exactly
Right.
what goes into that product council.
Right. Yeah. Got it. Thank you for sharing that. So as part of this phase, it's really important to get those requests in and have a consistent process around it. And CSM's the access to customers that they have plays a key role in this. The fact that when in the discover phase, when product teams are deciding to figure out the details of what is it that they want to build, the CSM relationship really is really beneficial. Add to that the insight that CS teams have about the knowledge of the customer's business. Having that insight early into the product planning process and the discovery process ensures that product teams are building a more complete solution that tailors to all those nuances of those customers' requests. And finally, CS teams also have based on their discussion with customers, have a sense of which areas of the product are lacking versus, have opportunity for improvement based on the general perception, based on their interactions with customers. And those requests can also come in during the planning phase so that product teams are able to prioritize on those. Moving to the next phase, at this point, we have a clear outline of what is it that we want to plan for in a given period, and then product teams have done the discovery. The next phase is to be able to go design for various prototypes in terms of understanding the customer's problems, and then being able to come up with various prototypes. The key is to not invest and basically get validation early on before product teams invest in actually building a solution. And having partners with customers is going to be extremely beneficial in building the right solution. And having some lighthouse customers, which is early adopters, who are interested in those specific areas would be a great start. And CS teams can offer the right partners for product teams to partner with as product teams begin sort of this design process. Now, this is an iterative process where design teams are working with product teams to come up with various solutions, validating that with those early adopters, early customers, reworking the feedback mechanism. But while we go through this phase, there is also CS teams can play an important role to just be the voice of the customer internally in product organizations. We do this very judicially at Totango, where we have an internal CS team that plays the voice of the customer role, where once product teams have understood the problem, done the deep discovery, and iterated on the designs, we do another rev on the iteration to get a voice of the customer view based on what feedback there are areas that we may have missed, and just to capture that in. Just another question around this. Do any of you have any voice of customer programs in your organization? All right. Do you mind just briefly explaining, like, what do you guys do?
It depends on what level that you're looking at it. If you are an account team facing the customer, we have a similar community to the ones you're setting up.
Okay.
We have user groups, focus groups to talk to each other. Internally, as we've rolled out Totango, we've also had a series of user groups and council members giving feedback, helping us with UAT things about it.
Yeah, but that is on the we're talking about your success factors or any specific product as part of that.
So voice of the customer, we do the survey.
All around. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And then basically the awareness part is where CS teams, because of their knowledge of customers' businesses, provide that additional level of scrutiny for product teams, where they can make sure that the designs that we're going to build, the product or the feature that we're going to build, will meet all those nuances that different customers that their customers have as they're experiencing the product. As part of the build phase, where product teams have worked with engineering, now we have a initial version of the product out, and we're doing this for Ibiza, the summer release that Ravit was talking about. We've done an early launch. Now we're tracking adoption. Early adoption, we want to make sure that customers are adopting it, but it's not easy. I mean, customers are busy, and it requires a constant sort of involvement from CS teams to be able to make sure that customers are adopting it. But for that, it's important for product teams to package the outcomes like Kevin was talking about in terms of being able to empower CS teams. What are we talking about in terms of packaging outcomes? There could be, as part of the feature, there may be services needed, there may be documentation, training. It's basically product is not just building the product, but also packaging the entire outcome so that every team is geared for success as this is rolled out and is being adopted by customers. And the packaging outcome is one part of it, and then also being able to have the analytics so that when CS teams are working on helping customers adopt, we also have the insight about how are users adopting it, which users need more help, which customers need extra work. So this is the part where CS teams can sort of help customers adopt or help them adopt the features. And then the resources that product teams are providing to CS can also be tailored by those CS where it's necessary to adopt it for their specific customer needs, and then also help customers sort of understand this in the context of their business. For example, this rapid insight forms that we released as a feature, it means different things for different customers. Our goal was to ensure that we are able to capture information from, like Ravit put it, people's brains, people's minds. But the idea is, for example, when I was describing this feature to one of the customers, his eyes lit up and he said, I have so much information in paper contracts, and now you've given me a way to digitize that information. I can send, all my salespeople are selling deals with all their little thresholds that they're selling, and I have no way to act on this information. So now he is going to build these forms, the rapid insight forms that we talked about, and he's going to create these forms, send out to salespeople so he can capture the information, basically the information that they put in the paper contracts, which right now wasn't even digitized. Now he has means to digitize this information. Once this information is digitized, you can act on it. You can have success plays, you can have campaigns, so all the processes follow. So this is the part where CS teams can explain or narrate that and help customers understand what power, how this feature can be leveraged for them to gain value. So as part of the adoption, are there any prospects in the room or all customers? Prospects? OK, thank you. The reason I wanted to know that was I wanted to know if I should go into the details of a little bit of a success block. I'll do that anyways. Our customers obviously are familiar with success blocks. Success blocks are really those modular units of packaging of information around every specific piece of the customer journey that really helps you manage and operationalize that piece of the customer journey. Success blocks could be used for onboarding, adoption. It basically captures your customer's business model for that part of the journey, and you have a single place to see how you're doing against that part of the customer journey, which customers are onboarding, which customers are not onboarding, which customers are adopting, which customers are not adopting, and then also have your entire strategy in place. What do you do when your customers aren't adopting? There is a game plan, which is the success plays. If there are best practice resources, you can have those available in the success blocks so that these are then automated, and your CS team now knows what to do on various scenarios based on issues that you're anticipating, or it could be even good adoption. Good adoption could be, hey, can we work with them to get a G2 crowd review? Low adoption could be a different game plan. Whatever it is, you have the ability to do that. And success blocks give you a great way to do that. And as you can see, you can have customers with different levels of adoption. So you can have different goals and different KPIs based on customers with different levels of adoption and track that. And also be able to operationalize that, like I was talking about with success plays, based on customers with low adoption or high adoption. All of that is possible. So with that, I'll just wrap up real quick. So the essence is that CS teams can help product with access, insight, and awareness of their customers, and can help with every phase of the product cycle. Kevin?
Perfect. Thanks, CJ. All right. So what I'm going to go through is I'm going to provide a little bit of a framework for how this can all fit together. And I'll actually talk a little bit beyond just the product and CS relationship as part of it. A lot of stuff on that diagram. We'll start at the very top. So if you've got a product team that's actually building an outcome, think of the scope. It's got to be beyond just creating a product or a service. It's got to be packaged. It's got to contain all of the things that are required. And there should be the advanced thought of the journey that should follow on what must happen in order to deliver that outcome for a customer. Right? So it's got to be beyond just here it is, what actually must happen from that point forward to deliver that outcome. And so if that is the product-led part of it, what happens is that goes over to kind of the next stop in that value chain, which essentially would be marketing and sales. So generate the awareness, make sure that all the right content's out there to do your customers and prospects to do their research and find out information. And there's stuff on the website, and there's some engagement programs where you're nurturing opportunities. All that stuff happens, and then ultimately the outcome of that is you're making some promise to the marketplace, and you're selling an outcome, right? You're creating that expectation that a customer is going to have. And then there's the handover that basically would happen to customer success, which would be then delivering that outcome. And so as you progress across that journey, there needs to be the right handovers and linkages so that you can deliver on that promise that's being made to the marketplace, that you're making to specific customers, and then ultimately you deliver on, which should help fuel growth and retention and all the things that CS teams would want to achieve. So when you think about that, from a product perspective, Vijay spoke about designing and building the outcomes to be delivered. So not just the capability, the packaging becomes really important. So if you are going to require that it's a complex product and service, and people are really going to need to be trained, and there needs to be self-help content that's out there, that advanced thought can be really meaningful when you think of the downstream experience. And so product teams should be thinking about that, and there should be a feedback loop from CS that helps with it. The outcome journey, when you kind of skip across, you've acquired a customer, at that point, and you kind of get into the install onboard phase. When you think of that outcome journey, there should be some aspect of a proactive guided journey that exists. What I mean by that is that there's a series of activities, engagement points, things that must happen and be true for a customer to get that outcome on a consistent and reliable basis. And that's a proactive set of activities. That design, there's going to be some key places. Vijay spoke about that, so adoption would be one. That's a feedback loop that would help product teams for sure. From a sales perspective, obviously, there's things like handovers to transition the relationship and knowledge about that customer environment that should also be coming over to CS. Separate and apart from that, there should be this reactive early warning system and remediation capability that might involve escalation activities. And essentially, what that should consist of is you should, based on the outcome that you're expecting to produce and based on those engagement points, you should be able to see where something goes, you've jumped a guardrail, you've veered off of that proven path to success that you want to follow in that proactive process. And you should be able to detect it. You should be able to classify that problem into a type so that it's a known thing. So it can't be some infinite number of problem types that you encounter. You should be able to classify it. And the reason you'd want to do that is so you can line up the right corrective response against that category. So now if you have a specific problem, you can line up, here's how we know we can fix that problem and return that customer back to that proactive guided journey to success in the outcome. The other sections around expansion and renewal opportunity, there's various ways to implement that. Just came from a session where we talked about a variety of implementation options. That does vary. Generally, CS teams are participating in some way, shape, or form in that expansion and renewal event where there's some revenue accountability that would sit in CS teams. The extent to which might vary based on solution complexity, scale of the typical customer contract, a variety of factors. This last area around customer marketing or nurture. So the traditional forms of marketing would be brand, demand gen type marketing. When you go into that post-sale content, there's still a lot of valuable opportunities to leverage automation and some of the same exact content, but to help drive adoption, to help resolve common problem types, and to engage those customers very regularly. So as a framework, I would say that proactive guided journey, there should be a bias and shift to having more activities in that category because that's your engine to produce outcomes on a reliable basis. Obviously, when problems occur, you want to be able to deal with those, but the idea would be avoid them by doing the right work. So for product teams, when you start to unpack that a little bit and getting into just some specifics on where there can be a fit, so around outcomes, so designing and building that capability, that's a direct fit into that proactive journey or proven path to success. If you can know here's how we plan to deliver that outcome to a customer that we're promising to market, promising to customers, you can start to design the specific engagements that are going to go from an initial onboarding, which might even include the relationship transition, it might include the knowledge about what a customer expects to get, all the way through to the customer maybe gets an initial outcome and then ultimately higher levels of value. That should continue and be a continuous value production loop as well. For roadmap, that's another big category. So when you think of all those problem types and you're seeing all the trends, here's the types of things that we see as frequently occurring problems. Your ability to classify those, look at the frequency with which they're occurring, and look at the impact that each of those problem types have, gives really valuable feedback to the product team so they can actually resolve it for many customers all at the same time by making product improvements. And sometimes that's not a functionality difference, it might be a supportability improvement. It might be a performance improvement. So things that are in the quality arena oftentimes fit there. For expansion and renewal, just engagement with larger opportunities. So there's valuable resource that sits in product teams. You have the ability to look out and look at things like roadmap, but certainly when it comes to all of the use case examples and being able to look across a very large customer base for what might help solve a particular customer situation, product teams are great at that pattern recognition because they're living very deeply in the mix of what's valuable to customers when they're planning the future. And so this last area around customer marketing and nurture, there is differences in where a product marketing team might sit, so that may or may not be in a product management organization. But there's a lot of valuable user content that already exists that's oftentimes pointed at acquiring customers. And so the extent to which you can use that in a post-sale fashion to improve your quality of interactions, especially when it comes to automated communications or doing training and enablement for CS teams, can certainly help out as well. And so we've gone through a bunch of these areas, but if you look at that partnership opportunity, ultimately customers are expecting to get the outcomes that they were promised. And so there is this opportunity to come up with a design where you can proactively deliver on those outcomes and those promises. The extent to which CS and product teams can partner and work together should improve your ability to have that reliable, systematic way of producing happy, satisfied customers that are getting the value that they want. So with that, I think we do have some time for some questions as well.
When it comes time to train people, not customers, putting them aside for just a moment, your internal customers, your people,
Right.
who does that fall on? What is your methodology? Is it working? And are you still talking back and forth about who should own that piece?
Yeah, so I think one of the primary ways is we just have a very regular cadence of having review calls and webcasts where there's immersion that takes place in the product. And so that's an all the time thing that's happening regularly. When it specifically comes to maybe something that's we know that there's a big need out there for, it's maybe been talked about for a while, and the development path has been a little bit longer. What we'll do is, so I'll give an example. So we just, Ravit in the main session talked about forms a little bit. So Vijay, you came into one of our team meetings, and so picture a room. There's probably some people remote, other people in the room. Although there are all of those calls, it's also like the time to step back and do a little bit deeper, use case immersion, give feedback, ask questions. How might we do this? So you did that, and I think you probably left the room at this point. And so in the room, we started trying it out. So we're going to use this immediately, and so that gives us, to give feedback, of course, but it also, our CS team has to be able to, speak with a large number of customers also and explain it. And so the extent to which you can do that, if you've used it personally, obviously it's easier to do. So in that case, what we actually did is we said, well, what have we wanted to do for quite some time that we just haven't gotten around to it? And there's some contract attributes that just, never really, got updated. So we came up with a list right then and there, designed the form. We actually added things into dimensions, I think, as we were doing that as well. We pushed it out with a due date so that we actually get two sides of that. How do you set up and configure it? And then also from a CS perspective, what's that going to feel like when you actually receive the work and have to participate in that process? So a variety of ways, but I think the frequency of that training is important.
I'll just add one more. You asked about responsibility. I believe that product teams are definitely responsible for sharing that because they've envisioned the idea, they've built it, so they've talked to customers, they understand what are the various contexts in which it can be used. So definitely the first part of information dissemination is definitely product teams either doing coordinated sessions, walkthroughs, and hopefully, also involving CS teams a little early on, like I said, voice of the customer, showing them design, saying, hey, this is coming up. So it's a gradual build up. Specifically in Totango, what we do is every 2 weeks, we are releasing a sprint. And before the sprint is released, we have a 1-hour training session for CSMs, for the entire CS team, support team, and we even invite sales to talk about what are the features that we are releasing. We actually demo the features, talk about the use cases, and as part of our release, we also write the knowledge base articles that are linked to the release notes. So you will be able to, even customers can read that, but CS teams definitely can also read that, when they can't attend. Of course, the sessions are recorded and that's shared as well.
All right.
Sure.
Any other questions?
All right.
Okay, let's go
Let's
with
go to-
Dave, since he's closer, then I'll come back to you.
Kevin and Vijay, thank you again. Lots of valuable information there.
Thank you, Shar.
So the question is based on a school of thought. For the customer, the product is the most important thing that they get from a vendor. And I've read and heard and experienced that the world's best customer success team cannot compensate for any product quality issues or insights that the customer has towards improving the product. Do you agree with that? If then, should making a better product and getting that insights from the customer back to the product team be their number one priority, even more so than servicing the customer or anything else?
Yeah, so it's of course important to have a great product or capability, and whether that's a service that's offered or whether it's a product context. So that's of course important, because if you have something that ultimately doesn't work and can't produce those results, then obviously that's a problem, and you're probably not going to compensate too well for that. However, what I'd say is that there's a lot of value if and I'll just use CS as an example. You can have a lot of capability and potential to do things, but if you didn't have the practice, the design, the programs, the content to go along with it, if you didn't train people to actually run the programs with customers effectively, you still might not get the results, even if you had a great product that you're bringing to market. And so I think you need to look at that entire chain, and that was the idea of that framework, is to provide some context for what sort of processes might you consider and look at in order to have a complete capability that just doesn't say, we've got this wonderful product, but we can make sure that customers are actually able to get great value from that capability, which might require just a whole variety of different things. And so I think that entire value chain really should be considered. But all that said, if you obviously didn't have a capability that worked or something like that, then that would be something that might prevent you from achieving the type of relationship that you'd want with customers.
Yeah. And I just want to add to that. I feel like feedback is coming in from all directions. Like I have my support team giving me feedback, I have CS teams giving me feedback, I have sales team giving me feedback based on their interactions. Mm-hmm. So I think CS feedback is extremely important, very important, because they understand the feature and their customers are experiencing difficulties and they're voicing that. But I wouldn't necessarily say, like you were trying to say, should that be the primary job of CS? I don't think so. I think it should be definitely the secondary job.
Okay. All right. Thank you for
so
your
I think we have time for one more based on.
He's written the question down, so I'm worried now.
All right, slightly similar question, but a little bit different perspective is, what do you see as CS's role in helping to prioritize and present business cases for new features and functionality and potential value that they could bring by delivering it to the product roadmap? Yeah,
so great question. Basically, what's the role in prioritizing the product roadmap is ultimately it. And so there's certainly some perspectives that a CS team may not have the greatest visibility into, because you're dealing with largely customers. And so if, let's say, it's a new product or service and it's relatively new market, there may be a large potential customer base out there that it's really about unmet needs and innovation that might not be coming from a customer source. So in the context of it's an established thing and you've got a large customer base, when you consider the frequency that you're hearing things from customers, I think that's one indicator. The impact of that change, so what would this mean from a customer and business outcome perspective? So how valuable would this new thing be, if it's a support improvement or if it's a new feature or capability? And the other part of it is certainly, if there's any sort of valuation that you can put on it based on maybe the opportunity that might exist across customers. So that's more challenging to do on an individual customer by customer basis. But if you can aggregate some of that information and see across an entire customer base how prevalent the need is, how meaningful it would be to customers, and ultimately if that's going to help you to compete in the marketplace, I think those are valuable perspectives that can be provided back to product teams. Yep. All right, so with that, I think we're out of time, but thank you so much, everyone.